the Senior Safety Advocate for the Marsh McLennan Agency, and he works with a lot of light industrial clients through the area, helping them with their safety process. So, Alan, I am going to let you take it from here and show us what we can expect with some safety onboarding.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time today. As was mentioned, my name is Alan Lombardo. I do a lot of these trainings, helping clients, build out their safety programs, providing additional resources, whatever we can help out with. So today we're going to talk about the first 30 days and beyond, which really is a topic that I get kind of excited to talk about because so much happens in this kind of time frame, right? It's where we, as the employer, set the tone of what the expectation is. And really, I view it as a first impression, right? Where, kind of going in, what do we want the employee to see? What do we want them to observe? What kind of expectations do we set? And the benefit for me, being on the consultant side, is I get to go into a lot of facilities. I do a lot of inspections, and honestly, within the first 5-10 minutes of doing a lot of my visits, you can really tell what type of safety program you're walking into. And not always, but a lot of times, right? And when talking about this topic, why I bring that up is if I can see it, right, as an outsider coming in, obviously the employees are going to see it. The new hires are going to see it, whoever's coming and going at that time. So it's a stressful time because, as we know, statistically, a lot of injuries happen in this time period, right? That's why we're focusing on this now. But it also, once again, it's a great opportunity to demonstrate what we're hoping, right? Trying to mold minds, mold behaviors, teach people what our expectations are, right? So there's a lot there. So throughout this, I'm going to go over some examples, things I've observed. I'm going to try to make it as kind of realistic, real world as possible, right? Things that we can take from this and implement at our facility. We're going to dive fairly deep into ergonomics as well, right? So we're going to tie ergonomics into these first 30 days, the orientation, so on and so forth. So any questions, obviously, let me know. I'm here to help. I appreciate the time. So some key points and takeaways. So as I mentioned, why the first 30 days matter. That's when, statistically, I think it's like the first 30, or I think it's the first 90 days. And then further on in someone's career, at near the end of their career, you see those kind of thresholds of when we see the most claim activity. And oftentimes it's because in that first 30 days or so, we miss the window on training, on orientation, on placing the individual in the right job, right? Making sure we have a job that fits them. That's why ergonomics is tied into this as well, is lots of injuries are material handling related, strains, slips and falls. So much of that goes directly into ergonomics, right? So go over the first 30 days, some ergonomic essentials for warehouse and light industrial jobs, some basics, right? I think with ergonomics, a lot of times we get kind of stuck in a spot where we overthink it, right? And so much of it, and really this is the kind of theme of a lot of what I'll talk about is putting yourself in the spot of the employee, right? If you're the new hire, if you're the person who's doing that job, realistically, are you set up for success or are you not? So many times with ergonomics, I go into facilities and I ask them, what's this individual doing? All right, well, they're lifting 50 pounds, working 12-hour shifts. Unfortunately, we're not able to rotate the employee and all these kind of variables that when I talk to management, when I talk to supervisors, it's like, well, what do you expect to happen, right? At some point, a carpal tunnel, rotator cuff, so many things can happen if we create that narrative, right? So don't overthink it. Put yourself in the spot of the individual, and it really goes a long way in being proactive, not reactive on the claim side. Some safe lifting techniques that stick. Once again, keeping it simple, right? We'll go a little bit more complex, a little more detailed than kind of bend with the knees, not the back. But this ties into my comment as well about the above bullet is if we're in a scenario where we're doing the orientation, we're doing the onboarding, we're getting people ready for the job. And as part of that, we're saying, safe lift, ask for help, don't put yourself in a situation where you're likely to have a strain. Yet then we put them in an area where they don't fit in the environment, or once again, they're working those long days. We're not encouraging stretching. We're not providing material handling aid, dollies, things like that. Once again, what do you expect to happen, right? It's very realistic for an injury to occur. And then integrating ergonomics into the onboarding. So setting the tone from day one, right? Leading by example, demonstrating what we expect. And the follow through, right? It's really key with all this stuff. It's not just, hey, it's your first day. Here's your first, couple days of orientation and onboarding. It's once we're out there, we're going to continue to enforce. We're going to continue to push that. and we're going to make the necessary changes. So once again, I'll share some stories, things I've done in my career, wins that we've been able to create. And I think you'll see that a lot of those, especially in regards to ergonomics, simple changes really go a long way. So I encourage everyone on the call to, if I say anything throughout this that triggers some thought, makes you think of the facility that you work in, take a chance, right? Try some new things. Don't kind of get stuck in the rut of here's how we've always done it. We've done it this way for 30 years. What if we do this, it might result in who knows what, right? Give it a shot, reevaluate. We're going to talk a little bit about inspections and assessments and looking at the work environment. And that's where when you make those changes, if we're assessing it monthly, every other week, whatever frequency works for you guys, you can make those changes and they can be effective. So I'm getting over, I don't know if it's a cold or what. So if I have to stop for water here, bear with me. So whenever I do any type of safety training that has to do with safety behavior, changing mindsets, changing tendencies, I like to show this visual. So much of safety ties directly back into this, whether you're talking about, wearing personal protective equipment, lockout, tagout, housekeeping. Once again, back to this visual. The goal is to positively impact the safety culture, make those changes. We want people to act a certain way when we're not around, right? We want to make sure that we set up a structure once again to allow for their success, right? We don't want to put them in a spot where we've done the opposite, right? And we're creating a spot where they're going to get hurt. So first thing I want to talk about is just values, right? What do we want? What are our goals? If the idea is, well, we want a reduction in claims, we want to meet OSHA requirements, needs, are we doing what needs to be done to achieve that, right? If we have a goal, is it a realistic goal? Do we have the internal resources to achieve that goal? Or are we just kind of making goals and hoping for the best, right? So it says values, I kind of think goals when I tie into that. Rules and procedures. So we'll talk about onboarding. A big thing with onboarding is, if there's multiple locations, multiple departments, a dozen or so different job descriptions, different tasks, do we have a structure to ensure consistency? Is it documented? Do we have a form to follow? What I see a lot in onboarding is, we have people that, say we have 5 supervisors. Each supervisor handles onboarding a little different, or they they implement and follow through on rules and procedures a little differently. And what does that create, right? It creates an inconsistency where we have some individuals that might feel a certain way about one procedure, one policy, and others that feel differently. I can think throughout this, I'm going to share some stories of a company that I've been working with for years and years, but depending on which department, it's a whole different company, right? Because some supervisors are very rigid, they set the tone, they follow through, all of those things, and some don't, right? So rules, procedures, we have to follow them, we have to establish them, be consistent, and ensure that we set up rules and procedures that can actually be followed, right? We don't want to set up a rule that is just impossible. I go to a place oftentimes where everyone in the facility is required to wear hearing protection, yet very few people do it. And when you walk around, and I kind of talk to management, what are we going to enforce it? What's going on here? And they have a very, very casual approach to it. And I think once again, if I'm that employee who's in the area and maybe they say from the start, hey, make sure you wear the hearing protection, and then they don't enforce it, where do I draw the line of what rules matter and what rules don't? When it comes to safety, what's important, what's not, right? So rules and procedures have to be followed. And that ties directly into leadership, right? Setting the tone once again. If you want to make a change, if you're on this call right now and you're like, man, we had 20 injuries last year, I really want to get it down to 5. You've got to make that commitment, and you've got to be willing to take some risk and to implement some changes. So in today, talking about orientation, talking about onboarding, talking about ergonomics, oftentimes some ergonomic changes, once again, really go a long way. Recognition is the kind of the orange bubble there. Positive reinforcement really helps out. I'm a big believer, when it comes to safety, I mentioned before, proactive, not reactive. I see a lot of companies that are very kind of heavy-handed, and they wait until something goes wrong, and then they jump in, right, to kind of set the tone at that point. And in my mind, I think we all can relate in this way. A lot of times that initial positive reinforcement, that initial encouragement as part of the onboarding is much more beneficial than on the back end, right? So that's where that recognition is really helpful in creating that safety culture. In addition to that, excuse me, kind of ties into recognition, then communication up here as well, but encouraging, proper communication, proper discussion, right? When it comes to ergonomics, who knows better about ergonomics than the people doing the job? So me as a safety person coming in, and I talk about ergonomic exposures, so much of my discussion is talk to the people doing the job, right? How do they feel about it? Are they able to do this job? At the end of a day, is their back sore? Is their elbow sore? Is their left elbow and not the right elbow sore? looking into that, right? Why is that the case? So through recognition, through positive reinforcement, we can encourage people to speak up, which is really, really important if you want to implement some positive ergonomic changes. Ownership, and ownership kind of ties into buy-in, right? Getting people to buy into what we're trying to do, right? If we're doing safety training, we don't want to just talk and it go away. We want people to listen, absorb the information, own it, and then demonstrate that on the floor, right? So kind of going full circle. Self-verification kind of ties a little bit into recognition, live in ownership. And then the key point of all of these, communication. It to me, whenever I have a new hire on my safety team, this is a point that I always really push as well, is the importance of communication. Excuse me, I apologize. The importance of communication and how that so much. I'll give an example in my personal career. When I go in and do a lot of training in facilities, we'll do a topic, and maybe it's a group that they do training every month. No one ever speaks up, and then someone from the outside comes in, and then right away the employees have a lot to say. And a lot of times the employer is surprised, right? Well, why are these individuals not speaking up when we do our training? And oftentimes it's because they feel pressure, right? They don't. There's not an open line of communication. So talking to employees, building trust, asking them, seeing how they're doing, getting their feedback whenever a safety policy procedure program is implemented is really important when it comes to the overall safety culture and the goal of that continual growth. All right, so a little bit on kind of staffing side. I'm going to breeze through a few of these, but the two main items that we can control from a staffing approach, right? Employee selection and onboarding. And two things come to mind when I think of employee selection is kind of goes into the right fit for the job, and then on the ergonomic side, creating an environment that fits that individual. I may have already mentioned, I work a lot in food processing, and I go into a lot of locations where whatever the demographic might be of that facility, a lot of shorter individuals, and I'll make comments to the staff about that, and trying to set up the situation to fit those individuals. And I'm very tall, and they'll make comments about like, well, you can't discriminate about someone's height. Obviously, you can't, right? But when it comes to that selection, good example. I was at a facility where they had several, I think the average height of the worker on a pace line, so a food processing line, was like 5'3", and they're all reaching up, right? So in doing that, ergonomic concern and also a laceration concern. And what I had mentioned to them is, are we adapting the environment knowing the height of the individuals? So then a few months later, I went back and they had adjustable like pedestal platforms for the individuals to work on. A small change made a huge difference. So when it comes to employee selection, finding the right people for the job, several of those kind of figures come to mind is who's best fit, whether it be physically, experience, and then where as the employer are we meeting in the middle to make sure that they're in an environment where they're comfortable, we've addressed the ergonomic concerns, and they can do the job without an increased risk. And then onboarding, which we're going to talk about today, setting that tone once again. And it'll go back to my comment about putting yourself in the mind and the spot of the individual, of the new hire. If it's my day one, has the onboarding that we've provided, has the orientation we've provided been adequate, or have we cut corners, right? Are we more focused on, well, we have this much time, that's what we can do, and that's it? Or are we saying, well, let's dedicate the time that we know is necessary to make sure that people know what they need to know for the job, right? So I'm going to talk about just your standard orientation, going over like a checklist kind of format, PowerPoint, what you'd expect a little bit on the onboarding orientation side. But one area that I think a lot of people miss is that mentoring, right? That on-site kind of real world job-specific training, whether it be forklift operation, using any type of bandsaws, heavy equipment, power tools, whatever it might be, right? And obviously in light industrial, what comes to mind often is going to be forklift. But rather than just saying, hey, here's your job, here's some training, go do it, are they on the floor, being able to have kind of a mentor, being able to see, learn by kind of be able to see what someone else is doing, right? That's very important to building up the confidence of someone. If it's just, hey, here's a training, go ahead and do it, we're missing a lot, right? So expanding on that onboarding. And once again, if we're a facility where we see kind of a lapse in a lot of our newer hires, a lot of the newer employees on site aren't doing the things we want them to be doing, or aren't learning as quickly as we would like, go back to this phase, right? Go back to the onboarding, go back to the orientation. Is there more that we can be doing? Are we properly educating and setting those individuals up for success so that when they go out in the field, they're ready to go? I apologize. Sorry, I'm fighting through this. Yeah, a few days ago, I had no voice at all. So I'm encouraged by today, but it's so once again, this kind of ties into the last slide. Better screening, better hires, better placement of those hires. So if we put people in jobs where they fit better, they're encouraged, they have good supervisory support, they've been properly trained, what's going to happen? Less injuries, lower turnover, less risk, better reputation, better morale, less use of internal resources. So it goes back to, it's really is time well spent, right? So, and that's one of my final points when I get to the end of this is safety training, onboarding, assessment, all of these, it's time well spent. And I know oftentimes it's hard to kind of gauge the value of safety. And a lot of my job is spent doing that, right? Talking to employers and kind of saying, hey, here's the value, right? Here's where it makes sense to dedicate this time. And this is exactly where that dedication is worthwhile, is in this time, right? If we're cutting the corner in the orientation, if we're not getting the right people, and we see 50-60% turnover in some of these light industrial jobs, some of these light industrial positions, which I see often, right? If that's happening, once again, take a step back, reevaluate our process. Are we doing things that are leading to the turnover? And I know a lot of times I get in spots where you hear people kind of blame the worker, right? Well, it's hard to find good work, or these people aren't working as hard, and back in the day, all these kind of comments you hear, right? And what we miss is a little bit of that self-evaluation of our internal processes to adapt for a changing work environment, a changing worker, and what those needs might be, right? So that's where some of this fitment and this screening and placement really matters. All right, a little more before I get into the orientation or the ergonomic stuff. I'm starting at the beginning, right? And some of that is through essential functions testing, right? So a lot of this goes back to trying to prevent placing people in, material handling related jobs that already have pre-existing conditions, or maybe they're not fit for that job. And I'll use myself as a good example. I look fairly healthy. I have 3 ruptured discs in my back that I've had for like 2 years that I just kind of deal with, right? So when I go to a lot of these facilities where, I kind of look at someone who's, stacking boxes, moving pallets, and once again, like 40, 50 pounds at a time doing the lifting, I could get that job. One day into that job, I would have an injury without a doubt, right? So when I relay that when I use that as an example, well, what could be done to vet through someone like me, right? Is there, through that essential functions testing, if you were to give me a scenario where I would have to bend in a certain way, lift certain objects, demonstrate the ability to have certain movements, I might be able to pass some of those. I might not be able to. There's a good chance I would not be able to, right? So you'd be able to prevent potentially a serious injury, a serious claim. And so many times when I'm looking at clients, claim history and some of their losses, you'll see, well, we had a great year, but we had that really bad claim. Or we had a great year, but we had that at the last minute, we had a back injury that's now costing us $200,000, $300,000. And I always say, well, let's analyze that. What could have been done to prevent that one claim? And if we're able to make changes to reduce that one costly claim, it really changes. It stops a bad year from becoming a really great year. And a lot of that can be done through this process of being proactive, right? Essential functions, fit for duty, making sure that they're equipped for the job that we have them the hope to place them in. Talk about this as well, right? So post-op for medical questionnaires, going over, making sure there's a clear understanding of here's the individual, here's the job I'm hoping to get the individual in, and being transparent with that. Once again, not 100%, things happen. People are able to get in spots they shouldn't be, and we're not able to always be as effective as we would like. But if we're doing nothing, if we're not being thorough, once again, if we're not being consistent, then we're really missing the mark. All right, so employee selection. First level, once again, I know I kind of talked about this already. I do this a lot of my trainings. I'm more of a little informal with how I go over this stuff, but better candidates lead to less turnover, less injuries, better client relations. And when I say better candidates, it's making the most and properly informing and properly preparing people for the job that we're going to go put them in. All right, onboarding, orientation, training, all those things fall in place to get them in the right spot. All right, so some strategies to manage risk. So now we're going to dig a little more into what we can do, what we can implement, going over some of the ergonomic stuff that we discussed. All right, so the first thing here, employees are statistically at higher risk of injuries during the first 6 months on the job. And the question is why, right? And I'm going to share a story here of a client I've been working with for a long time. This situation's been on my mind for months, so the timing of this is good. But they had an injury where it led to an amputation. A 20-year-old worker was involved in this. In essence, what happened is the employee had been there for 16 days. The orientation, the onboarding was good, but not great. It didn't go over some of the equipment-specific procedures that need to be followed. In essence, what happened was a late shift, second shift, didn't have a lot of supervisory support. There was a jam in a machine. The employee received poor communication from someone that they should manually put their hand in the machine to fix that jam. Well, of course, as you would expect, based on the story, the machine was running. Individual lost the tip of two fingers, right? So I was involved in the investigation. And I remember when one of the supervisors said something that was really in poor taste, but it kind of stuck with me when he was talking to this person. And they mentioned that, this was the guidance that they had received on why they did this. And they said, well, if that person had told you to jump off a bridge, would you have done it? And I was, obviously I don't like that kind of comment, but what more stuck to me, I got back to my car and I had like a 5-hour drive that day. And I was thinking, this was a 20-year-old individual, his first time working in this environment. There were some language barriers, several cultural barriers with this person who was here working. He was eager to work, eager to do what needed to be done, right? A great worker. And I thought, like, man, obviously, like, I don't think the person would have jumped off a bridge, but what came to mind is that worker would have done anything within reason, maybe, but anything that they would have been directed to do, right? Because it's such a vulnerable situation for that person to be in. Young, language barrier, not high education when it comes to the job that person was doing, not good training. So I thought, like, well, it ties very much into onboarding and this topic we're talking about today of like going back to that person to prevent it, what could have been done, right? Like brand new. If proper communication, proper training, proper onboarding would have been followed, this never would have happened. And I thought, like, man, how much of an influence management supervisors can be on encouraging or promoting, in essence, unsafe behaviors, unsafe acts. And once again, that comment that they had made about, would you do this if someone told you to, it really, really struck with me because I thought, well, yes, they would, right? They'll do a lot because that's where they're at in their career. And I thought about myself, when I was 20 versus now, right? The things that I would do, the things I wouldn't do, having the confidence to speak up and kind of make a stand of not putting yourself in an unsafe condition. And a lot of that is learned behavior, right? It's learned confidence. You don't just start out right off the bat feeling that way about these decisions. And so when it goes back to, why are employees statistically at a higher risk of injuries during their first 6 months? It's exactly that, because they're moldable, they're learning, they're looking for guidance, they're looking for a mentor. We can give them that guidance. We can allow them to have that type of mentor. We can allow them to have the type of supervisory support they need to do the job safely and to be a productive member of our team, of our company, right? So huge benefit, huge opportunity, right, when it comes to this time period of a new hire. So effective training new employees on safety can be challenging, but very important, very beneficial. And once again, I'll go back to time well spent when it comes to onboarding, when it comes to getting them in the right position. All right, so the benefits of this orientation. Knowledge and skills needed to do their job safely. So setting up that consistent process of day one, here's what we're going to do. Here's the questions we have. Here's what we want them to discuss. Don't just stick to compliance requirements, right? I see that a lot. Well, OSHA says this, here's the stuff I need to do, and that's all I cover. Be very specific. Look at your claim history. Look at what you've seen. Look at the close calls and near misses, the general best practices that need to be implemented, that need to be followed so that we prevent some of these accidents, right? Expand on it, making sure that we have a tour of the facility, making sure that we go over our commitment to safety, all those factors during the orientation process. Awareness and understanding of workplace hazards, specialized training. What I see a lot is, someone's only been here for a couple weeks. They've been trained to work here. Unfortunately, we're really busy today. This guy didn't show up and now we're going and we're doing this, right? So when I mention the consistency aspect, that's what I mean is worst case scenario, we can't have that kind of stuff happen where we have people being put in spots, being put in situations, being put in jobs where they're not really trained. And it goes back to my story again, right? Of this 20-year-old who had the amputation now is they'll do it, right? Well, have you ever driven a forklift? No. Do you feel comfortable? Yes, of course, right? Of course they're going to do it. Are they comfortable? No. But are they going to say that they're not? No, they're new. They're looking to set the tone. They're looking to make a good impression. They don't have the confidence at that point in their career to turn down something like that, right? That's where it's such a benefit for you guys to do that training. A little bit implementing safety programs. So some key programs. Obviously, we're talking about the orientation, talking about the onboarding, going over some developing that consistent, continual training, continual education, allowing that to kind of grow and mold as time passes. I'm a huge believer. I'm actually going to speak at a committee here this afternoon, safety committees. It allows that connection from management to the people on the floor. It gives everyone an equal seat at the table. When we talk about communication, if we don't have a committee, what other platforms do we have to ensure that everyone on the floor has the ability to speak up if something's happening, if they're seeing something, if they're observing something? That's where that committee is so beneficial. If we're looking to make ergonomic changes, a lot of that trial period, a lot of discussion can be facilitated by the safety committee. Slip, trips, and fall prevention, once again, that's a leading indicator. A lot of injuries we deal with. Routine preventative maintenance and maintenance programs, making sure that our equipment is kept and maintained in good usable condition, and good housekeeping practices, obviously, and safety inspections, which we're going to go over here in a little more detail, making sure that we more so in relation to ergonomics, but make sure that we have those routine inspections so that issues that are in place are addressed, and they're addressed in a timely manner. All right, so shadowing and mentoring training, which I briefly spoke about already, but new employees need to thoroughly understand how to work safely after going through their initial and job-specific training and onboarding. And so much of this, once again, putting yourself in the situation of the employee. Are you learning more by sitting in a classroom, going over a PowerPoint or going over a video or filling out a questionnaire? Or are you learning more being on the floor, observing the right kind of person, doing the right kind of job safely? And we all know the answer, right? I mean, you're learning a lot more seeing someone do it and seeing someone do it the right way. What has backfired is if the observations and the mentoring and the shadowing is done with someone who isn't really qualified to be doing it, and they're observing the wrong kind of behavior, right? We're setting the tone in the wrong way. So really very important. A huge benefit. And once again, where I see a lot of clients, a lot of companies I work with miss the mark when it comes to this is making sure that we're demonstrating that. And this ties a lot into ergonomics, where a lot of times during orientations, we might talk about, well, practice safe lifting. And we have a photo of someone who's bending at their waist, holding a box close to their body. But then they go out on the floor and they see the opposite, right? So when we're shadowing and we're mentoring, we also want to make sure that they're observing good ergonomic practices as well, right? So it all kind of ties in full circle. Benefits of safety training and orientation, kind of twofold, right? So the orientation has one benefit, the safety training has a different, right? When we're talking about the continual growth of the program. So orientation, obviously, we're setting the tone. We're letting employees know who we are as a company and what we expect. Very important. When it comes to the benefit of continual training, we're doing some of the same things, but we're educating, and we're more so awareness level. We're making sure people know that every single year we're educating on these things. What I find, so many places that I go into where I see poor housekeeping, I see machines that aren't guarded, I see forklift operators not wearing a seatbelt. It goes back to training, right? Like they're not communicating it. They don't have a consistent schedule. Once again, and this goes back to my first visual I had with the little bubbles and the safety culture slide, set up a process that works for you guys. Right. So when it comes to setting up a consistent safety training schedule, you want to make sure that the schedule that you guys are using works and can be followed. If the schedule is set up in a way that you can't follow it, you're going to lose your credibility right away. It's going to demonstrate that safety doesn't seem to be important. And once again, you're putting yourself in a spot where, it's just not sustainable. So pick a time of year, pick a day of the week, whatever it works, a time frame where you're able to stick to the process. You're able to stick to the program, stick to the schedule, make sure it's communicated, provide the resource, whatever you need. But the key is to make sure it's something that you guys can stick to, and that you don't, a lot of times I'll see a little client will have an injury, and right away, well, we got to address that. Right? We had a back injury, let's do all these things. And for a few months, we do everything great, and then right after that, it's not happening anymore. Why was that? Because the response was, aggressive, obviously, understandable, but we didn't think about the 2, 3, 6 months down the road, which is important, right? When we're thinking about these processes. So it helps employee retention, boosts productivity, stronger safety culture, addresses compliance requirements, and of course, saves money and resources and reduces stress. People like to be trained, right? Like that's what it comes down to. We're all that. Like, I have 3 new hires that started this week, started last week. And they want to learn, right? They want to be set up in a way where they feel comfortable, and that when they're out in the field doing the job, they've been given the resources to do it successfully. We all want the same kind of stuff when it comes to that. So the benefits of health and safety training: reduced insurance premiums, obviously, right? We want to keep those claims down. Enhances reputation. There are plenty of places I go to where people know when they show up there, they get to do whatever they want. I can be on my phone, I can show up late, I can do whatever. It's an easy job, right? Nobody cares. That happens all the time. Or, and what else you see in those scenarios? A lot of turnover, right? Where if we're a company that has that consistent process, that consistent training schedule, you'll see the opposite. You'll see commitment. You'll see long-term employees. You'll see people who have been there 20, 30 years. You'll see buy-in. Makes a big difference, right? That reputation changes quickly once we make those kind of changes. Increased productivity, reduction in absentees, and then of course, legal protection, compliance, those kind of requirements. So once again, training is money well spent, resources well spent, time well spent, right? So always be looking to improve. I had a call with someone recently that was talking about training and how they can do things differently. And, basically the comment was, we're doing these training and no one's following through, no one's listening. And I kind of asked them to describe what their training looked like and excuse me, what changes they had made. So I was like, well, you're having these issues and you're feeling that your training isn't effective. What changes have you made in the training to help to make it more effective? And the answer is, well, we haven't done anything. Well, it's like, well, that's part of it, right? Like if the training you're doing isn't working, if you're not seeing on the back end a change in behavior, a reduction in loss, a reduction in all these things we want, do something different. Maybe we're running into a communication barrier, more visual aids, more examples, more on the job, real world training, all that kind of stuff. If we're just videos, maybe we should add in a little bit more interaction. If we're doing no videos, maybe a few videos would be helpful, right? All those things are important. If there are language barriers, are we providing the people the resources they need, or are we taking a head nod from the class as they understand what I'm saying? And I've been put in that situation many times doing Spanish training. I don't speak Spanish, and kind of going in, and of course, like, well, it doesn't need to be in Spanish. Everyone here can speak English, fine. And it's like, well, maybe they can speak basic commands that allow them to get through the day. But when we're going over safety training where we want a certain level of comprehension, maybe Spanish training would be a more effective and more beneficial thing, right? So all those kind of fall into play to make sure that it's beneficial. We're not wasting time. If you're going to do it, make it beneficial and make sure it is set up in a way where it can get the results that you're looking for. All right. Ergonomics. So benefits of ergonomics. Obviously, we know in today's work environment, we need to make sure that we create a work environment. We have a area that's set up for the worker, right? That's kind of in essence, kind of like summary of ergonomics, setting up the work environment for the worker. And we see across the board a less fit, kind of a less healthy workforce, right? It's just kind of the nature of what's happening. So if we have a high expectation of production, we have a high expectation of shifts and shift schedules, and we're tying in the fact that we haven't addressed ergonomic concerns, and we also tie in the fact that we have employees that aren't as fit as they used to be. Well, we're the likelihood of there being an accident is pretty high, right? So very important to focus on doing the best we can. And kind of jumping around a little bit, when it comes to ergonomics, how often are we taking a step back and looking at the area, right? Assessing the environment, putting ourselves once again in the position of the employee. They're there doing the job. Could I do it? Would I be able to do that? If not, what would I need to be able to do that job successfully? Those are all simple changes that can be done to make a big difference. I mentioned earlier that the pace line where the individuals weren't really tall enough to reach over the table. Getting adjustable platforms. That's ergonomics, right? That's fitting into the environment. Who knows the type of claims we've reduced by doing that? Small things really goes a long way. Little anti-fatigue mats. Anyone who's been in a job or been in an environment where we're standing on concrete and you're standing there for 8 hours, it's brutal, right? The impact on your knees, on your back, your hips, the increased level of fatigue. Simply adding an anti-fatigue mat, inexpensive, easy, makes a huge difference, right? Small stuff can really be beneficial when it comes to ergonomics. There was a case study years ago, I think it was FedEx maybe did this, and they kind of addressed one of their bigger concerns. And I'll do a quick summary here of basically what happened, but the way in which people are lifting boxes, all boxes look the same. And if it wasn't FedEx, it was another one of the big, one of those type of companies, where the way they're lifting boxes is it was very difficult to tell based on the visual appearance of a box how much it weighed, right? So you would show up thinking there's one impact and there's another. So maybe I'm lifting 4 boxes out of the same size. 3 of them weigh 10 pounds. Then the final one weighs 50 pounds. That shock impact substantially increases the likelihood of a back injury. So just by putting the word heavy on boxes that were past a certain weight was enough to address that concern. Right? Small thing, but big impact on making those corrections. So ergonomics 101. So awkward postures, overreaching, repetitive motion, forceful exertion, vibration, anything that can lead to some of those musculoskeletal disorders, we want to try to address through ergonomics and making those type of corrections. And not to mention tying in ergonomics and tying in ergonomic discussions into the onboarding process, into the new hire process, going over these type of things. Once again, when I talk about communication, make sure that employees know, hey, if you're working on in a certain area and you're feeling some back pain or you're feeling some discomfort, let us know. Don't wait until it's an injury, right? Communicate that so we can make the right kind of changes. If employees start to see that ergonomic controls are being implemented, they're going to be more likely to speak up because they feel like their voice matters, right? The safety culture itself is going to make those improvements. Some ergonomic stressors, awkward posture, twisting, reaching, tilting, these increased likelihood of strains. And once again, we don't want to just say, this visual, right? We've seen these visuals before. We don't want to just say, hey, lift the right way during the orientation. Here, go ahead. This is what you want to do. And then they go to the floor and they're forced, because of the way our facility is set up, to do something totally different, right? We're not following through on our end. So that's where that can all tie in. These type of things really go a long way if we want someone to be able to safely do the job for a long period of time. I don't think I have a slide for this, but going over basic stretches, right? Like just simple things people can do before and after they start their day, after break, loosening their body. It makes a difference, right? If it's cold out, your muscles tighten. You go to lunch, you get out, and then right away you start lifting, your body's tight, right? More likely to have an accident, more likely to have an injury. Some more basic motions here, right? On a lift. And with this, you want to try to set up so there aren't a million different variables that people have to choose from. And I mentioned the FedEx example about the boxes, right? Where if we give people a million different options, then they're more likely to make the wrong choice, or they're more likely to get confused on the direction we're giving. So if we're able to standardize the process so that it's very cut and dry on what we should do, what we shouldn't do, how to lift, when it's this color box, and obviously colors, it might be not the best example, but when it's this box, we use the dolly. When it's this box, we use kind of a group lift, right? We have people that help out, and we have 2 people to a box. When it's this box, you can lift it yourself, right? Those kind of processes really make a big difference. Because in reality, any one of us calls who's had a back injury or knee injury, whatever, shoulder, that like you could be feeling great, and then one bad motion can be enough to create a substantial back problem. And a lot of these back problems are reoccurring, right? So they're costly claims that we're paying for years and years. Difficult to manage. The more ergonomic stressors, something that isn't often discussed, is just basic posture. I used to have a slide that kind of went over like the human head, I think weighs 8 pounds or something like that. I could be wrong. But if we're slouching all day long and we're bending at the neck, that 8-pound head is going to create a lot of fatigue and strain on your shoulders and upper back and your neck, right? So just focusing and enforcing good posture, good body mechanics really is beneficial in a big way, right? To address some of these things. So once again, something that isn't often discussed, but if you're working 8, 10, 12-hour shifts, standing upright, sitting up in the right kind of posture in a chair, stretching really helps out. So keeping your wrists in a straight line, head looking forward, not tilting, elbows close to the body. Once again, very beneficial and something that oftentimes we don't think about. So some injury prevention tips here. So sit close to what you're working with, avoid bending and twisting, and lifting with both hands, right? So some simple, once again, behaviors to follow, things that we want to encourage. In addition to kind of ergonomics, like proper fitting clothing, right? So loose fitting clothing can snag. It can lead to us moving in ways that aren't natural. The right kind of footwear is a big factor. I mentioned, if we're standing on concrete floors all day long or whatever our processing area might be, we have the anti-fatigue mats. Do we have a shoe policy to ensure people are wearing the right kind of comfortable shoes? All those make a huge difference. And something else, which I'm sure I have here on a slide, employee rotation, proper rests, proper documented breaks, making sure that people get the right kind of breaks, making sure that we encourage and we set up the situation where people are always taking breaks. Once again, back to my experience in the food industry, I go to a lot of places where, they set up a situation where it's like, well, when we're busy, we cut the break short. It's like, well, what are we doing, right? You cut those breaks short, what's going to happen? We're increasing the risk and we're increasing the potential for somebody to get hurt. So more on the tips, right? Periodic breaks, rotate tasks. I was one slide ahead with some of my comments, right? But make sure we rotate employees. Set up a process where we can do so. I've run into situations where, certain like union restrictions, certain people can and can't do it based on that. This person makes this much money because of this. They can't rotate to this. Set up a process that makes it possible. Make sure that people are able to, once again, if someone's working a 12-hour shift with only a couple breaks and on their feet all day lifting, they're going to have problems. There's no doubt about it, right? So we've got to set up a process so that it makes sense for them. Repeating the same movements over and over can lead to strains, injuries in your joints and in your muscles, right? So that's where that rotation comes in. Even something that you look at and you say, well, that won't lead to a strain, right? There's no weight there. Just the simple repetitive act of a motion like that, using a keyboard, not having the wrist properly supported, all those could lead to that. So sometimes with ergonomics, we think about, well, it's got to be heavy, it's got to be whatever. It doesn't, right? The repetition alone can be enough. So we've got to assess and we've got to review those tasks to make sure that we're providing the right kind of resources. So some stressors, right? We talk about physical fitness, pre-existing health problems, physical characteristics like height I talked about, right? Being able to fit in the environment. Prior injuries are a big one. Non-work activities and hobbies, right? If someone shows up to work on a Monday and they're already limping, they look like they're grimacing, lifting right off the bat, talk to them, right? See what's going on. Excuse me. System controls, right? So things we can do. Obviously, eliminate the hazard. Easy, right? Not really. If we're not able to eliminate the hazard, what can we do? Can we substitute things? Can we give something as simple as a dolly? Can we reassess the way something's been done? I kind of love the training talking about just because we've been doing something a certain way for years and years doesn't mean we have to do it that way moving forward. If there's a better way, try it. Something that's really big in safety right now is technology, right? And I'm not a great technology guy, but lots of resources out there, and that the resources are continuing to increase. Because what do we know? Insurance costs keep going up, premiums keep going up, the cost of business keeps going up. So anything that we can do, any resource that we can take advantage of is worthwhile. So as things come up, as you see certain things become available on the ergonomic front and anything else safety wise, take advantage of it, give it a shot. This should be something that's continually evaluated from a program standpoint so that we have the right kind of controls. So some ergonomic programs. So set clear objectives of what you want to accomplish, right? What is the program supposed to be? What do we want to get done? I kind of mentioned the reevaluating aspect of it, right? It's something we're continuing to monitor. Communicate ergonomic safety objectives to all employees. Ensure that ergonomic assessments and improvements are coordinated. I said coordinated by the safety committee. They don't have to be, but if you have a safety committee, great. Take advantage of it. It's a great way to get them involved and to get real world firsthand experience on the floor of what some of these ergonomic exposures might look like. And engage in discussion about ergonomic work conditions with employees, kind of tying it back to that committee once again. Have a documented process, something you can follow consistently. Eliminate those variables where we're busy one month, we can't follow it. Well, we all know that with safety, unfortunately, oftentimes it gets cut lower and lower and lower down the pecking order, right? Production is what it is. So make sure safety is set up in a way where it can be consistent and we can follow it. So the programs, observing and assessing work areas and employee behaviors, reviewing employee injury reports to determine trends that may be due to ergonomic conditions, and implementing necessary appropriate controls to minimize musculoskeletal disorders. I'm eager to get to the next slide here because I want to show you this. So cool kind of visual. So I talked about some of the new resources that are available to you guys. This is one that I'm using more and more, the use of AI technology, artificial intelligence, to address ergonomic exposures. So lots of resources out there that provide this. This isn't like a sales pitch or anything, but several companies you guys can reach out to, I can help recommend that. This kind of visual here demonstrates where you basically take a video, take a photo of someone doing their job, and through the use of technology, it automatically shows you where the greatest strain or physical exertion is occurring. So green obviously is good, orange is getting worse, and then red is bad. So you're able to have a very targeted approach to ergonomic corrections based on knowing exactly when that individual doing the job is exerting the most negative energy. So it's pretty cool that that's out there. These same technologies also automatically generate, here's the issue, here's the visual, here's what they were doing at the exact time where they were in the greatest risk of a strain, and here's recommendations of how it can be addressed. So really cool stuff out there when it comes to assessing ergonomic exposures. Once again, take advantage of it. It's an ever-growing industry. Fairly cost-effective, right, with doing some of this stuff, but there's a ton there that can be done. All right, so some final thoughts, right? So we talked about the theme of this, a lot of it being proactive, not reactive. Whether we're talking about onboarding, finding the right kind of individual for the job, ergonomics, setting up a work environment to properly fit the employee, all of that is a proactive approach. And that's where we want to be. That's where we want our safety program to be primarily focused. Obviously, reactive is on the claim management side, also very important. But if we can prevent the claims from happening altogether, even better. The importance of employee selection and onboarding. Set the tone. It's the first impression. We all know how important a first impression is. If we miss on that window and that first impression is negative, it's very hard to change the way that individual views what we're trying to do and what type of kind of investment we're wanting them to see in safety. Right. So set the tone. Employee training is time well spent. It is, right? I mean, it makes a huge difference. Effective training, not just training, effective training that works, that breaks through whatever communication barriers we might have. Addressing ergonomic risk factors, right? The things we see. And the key with this is addressing, right? Like go out there and look, go out there and observe through the safety committee, talk to the individuals doing the job, see what they're doing, see how we can help. Little things go a long way when it comes to ergonomic improvements. And then, of course, creating a safer work environment. That's what it's all about. It's from the beginning, from placing the individual, onboarding, continual training, ergonomic exposures, addressing, committee, all of that, right? All ties in. One leads to the other. And be realistic with what you guys are able to accomplish. If we're a smaller company, if we don't have a lot of resources, that doesn't mean we don't want to focus on safety. It means that the approach might be different than a company that maybe has a full-time safety person. Still can be effective, but we have to be realistic with what we can do. I appreciate your time. Hopefully this is a trade that you guys got a few valuable points from. Any questions, let me know.
All right, Alan, thank you for joining us today. I know as you were talking, I'm like, uh-oh, my posture.
I've been sloshing this whole time now, so shame on me, right? I thought I'd do better. Yeah.
One of those reminders that we know it, and then we still see ourselves hunched over a keyboard and the mouse and everything like that. Well, thank you for your time today. We do appreciate it. Of course, this training has been recorded, and Higher Level will distribute to those that attended. So, of course, you can always go back, look through those slides. Coming up on August 13th, our next event is going to be a very special one as Higher Level is celebrating its 30th anniversary. We're bringing our CEO, Teresa Katubig, to High Notes, and it is titled No Filter, Just Facts, 30 plus years of business, life, and leadership. So that should be an exciting High Notes, one that you don't want to miss, as we don't get her as a guest on these events very often. So thank you all for your time. That recording's coming your way, and we hope to see you in August.
Thank you.